Should you buy a red Komodo? Well, it depends. In today's video, I'm going to do my best to share my thoughts on the red Komodo after owning one for the past 6 months and hopefully help you make a better decision on whether or not you should buy one of these for yourself. Before we get into this review, if you are new to the channel, my name is Mac and I own a photo and video production company. On my channel, I bring you videos sharing as much knowledge as I can to help you become a better creator. If that's something that you're interested in, please make sure to hit the subscribe button down below so you don't miss out on future videos. Now, I'm not a super technical guy when it comes to camera specs and reviews and stuff, so if you're looking to nerd out over all the little details of the red Komodo, then this probably isn't the right video for you. Instead, I'm just gonna tell you why I decided to buy this camera and give you my thoughts about it after owning one for the past 6 months. I'm not gonna lie, when the Komodo was first announced and I saw the specs, I wasn't really impressed. The fact that you couldn't even shoot 60 frames per second in 6K with the full sensor readout seemed like a huge bummer to me. Also, all of the crop factors when changing resolutions and frame rates and this and that just seemed like a real turnoff to me at the time. The lack of custom buttons on the body seemed like it'd be a really annoying camera to use, and the fact that there was only SDI and no HDMI out on this camera didn't really seem too appealing to me. But after about a year of this camera being out and I started to see other people posting footage they've shot with the Komodo, it really started to turn my head and started gaining some interest back into this camera. Now, I know this is super cliche to say and everybody seems to say it, but ever since I started my filmmaking journey, I have always wanted a red camera. There's just something about the aesthetic of a red camera itself. Just the shape of the body, the top handle, the monitor, the rigs just look so good. Plus the image quality that comes out of these cameras is just absolutely insane, top notch, just, oh, so good. However, for the type of work that I do, I'm going to be completely honest with you guys and tell you that I definitely do not need to own a red camera.
I definitely do not need to own a red camera.
But I do love trying a bunch of different cameras because I personally believe that you won't really know which camera works best for you and the type of work that you do until you try, or which camera you just like working with best, like which one gives you the most joy and fulfillment when shooting and creating projects, you know? So that's why I like to try all of these different cameras. And if you've been on the channel for a while, you know that I have had a lot of cameras. Anyway, one day, my buddy Nick that works here at one of my local camera stores texted me super randomly. I remember this day like it was yesterday. It was a Monday afternoon. He texted me and he was like, "Dude, we have a Komodo in stock. I know you want it. Do you want it?" I hit him back with a simple one-word reply. Yes. At the time, Komodos were super hard to get, as they still kind of are now, and there wasn't really many floating around on the used market, so I had to jump on this opportunity and kind of see for myself what red cameras were all about. So the first thing that I want to tell you after owning this camera for the past 6 months is be prepared to spend more than $6,000 on this camera if you do end up buying one. If you plan on rigging the camera up for bigger productions, then you are going to be spending an extra couple $1,000s on all of the accessories and tools needed to get the camera to that, production ready state. So just keep that in the back of your mind if you're buying this Komodo for bigger productions. However, if you plan on keeping the camera very minimalistic and small in its like natural cube style form factor, you're still gonna have to spend an extra like $1,000 to $2,000 on CFast cards, batteries, a monitor, and a side handle. So just keep that in mind before making your decision and pulling the trigger on a red Komodo. So over the past 6 months, I can honestly say that all of my initial doubts about the Komodo are pretty much completely irrelevant. For 99% of the work that I'm doing for my clients, I'm usually never shooting in a frame rate higher than 48 frames per second. And on the Komodo, when shooting in 6K, 2:4:1 aspect ratio, you can actually shoot up to 50 frames per second. However, if you plan on exporting your project in, let's say, 16:9 aspect ratio, all you have to do is put it into a 4K timeline, and since it's 6K footage, downscaled into a 4K timeline, when you crop in post to get rid of the black bars on top and bottom, you're not losing any detail or resolution or sharpness or anything like that. I talked about the lack of custom function buttons on the body potentially being an issue for me, but yeah, they really haven't been an issue because the touchscreen on top of the camera is actually pretty decent, and the user interface, like navigating through the menus and getting to the certain settings that I need to get to, is super quick and easy. And a lot of the times I'm also shooting on like full manual lenses, so just controlling the aperture right there on the lens is no problem. I don't need to go into the camera to change the aperture or anything. And I have kitted my camera with the outrigger side handle, which then adds a record button right underneath my thumb right there, so it makes it super easy for me to hit record when I need to begin rolling on a new take. The global shutter in this camera is actually something that really took me by surprise, and I didn't know how good it actually was until I shot with it. If you've been following me for a while, then you know that I love to shoot handheld, and having this global shutter just really kind of emphasizes the handheld look. And when I mean emphasize, I mean it makes it better, right? Like, it doesn't emphasize it in a bad way, it emphasizes it in a good way, because you don't have any of those, you know, rolling shutter effects where you have all this like jello effect of vertical lines when you're doing fast movements with the camera. So yeah, the global shutter is great for handheld work. It's great for every type of work, to be honest, but for me, that's where I have seen the biggest difference. So at first, I wasn't really huge on 6K resolution. Like, resolution isn't really a huge selling point for me. But since I have started shooting in 6K, I have realized how beneficial it actually is for cropping in post, adding keyframes, faking camera movement, and even stabilizing clips after the fact. The dynamic range in this camera, man, it just hits different. Technically, there are other cameras on the market that have more dynamic range than the Komodo, and there are plenty of videos here on YouTube that kind of prove that, and you can go and search for those videos after you watch the rest of this video. But the Komodo, just all reds in general, just the way that they handle the highlight roll off and the shadow detail, and just like the smooth gradations between like the tones in the image, it just looks so good. There's like a very specific like nuance there to the image that it's hard to explain, but it's just got sauce, man, and it just looks so freaking good. Red's color science, in my opinion, is also very, very nice. There's just something about the richness and deepness in the colors. It's probably like the 16-bit RAW and all that technical bullcrap, but yeah, there's something about, you know, the way that this camera handles mixed lighting situations. Just seems like colors are always accurate and you're never really fighting against the camera or the colors in post. It just always kind of seems to work. I also edit in Final Cut Pro, and the R3D files that this camera produces just work seamlessly in post-production. I'm never really fighting against the computer to, you know, navigate through a timeline. My computer never really buffers or stutters or skips or anything. The files just work, which really kind of amazes me because it's 6K raw footage, 16-bit. Like, that's nuts. I edit on an M1 Mac Mini for those of you who are interested. And yeah, like the files just work. Everything just works. That's what I really, really like about the Red. It's just, everything just works. But there is no such thing as a perfect camera, and there has to be a little bit of give and take when it comes to making decisions on gear. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the Sdi Port. If you're not aware, the Red Komodo's Sdi Port has been known to fry out quite often on a lot of users and owners and operators because they are not following the proper SDI protocol. The Komodo has a 12G SDI port, and if you don't know what 12G is, it's basically just a 4K signal. So that 12G SDI port, those are known to be very sensitive, and if you don't follow the proper steps and procedures when it comes to powering on your camera and plugging in the SDI cable, that 12G port in particular can be prone to frying out because it'll act as, you know, the ground for the power supply, and it'll just burn out the SDI port. I don't know this like super technical specifics, obviously, as you can tell, but that is like my general understanding of it. And there is a proper technique to plugging in your SDI when you're powering up the camera and unplugging the SDI when you're powering down the camera. But basically, just to run you through the protocol really quick, it's very, very simple. So don't let this, you know, take away from you buying the camera or making a decision strictly because of the SDI issue. But all you have to do is just make sure that you power the camera on first, you power all of its accessories on as well, and once everything has full power, then you plug in your SDI cable. And when you're powering off the camera or doing a battery swap, you unplug the SDI cable first from both the camera and the monitor just to be safe, and then you power everything down. So when you're powering on, it's SDI's last. When you're powering down, it's SDI's first. That's all you gotta remember. The boot up time and the sensor calibration on this camera is something that I had to get accustomed to when I first bought it. It takes about 30 seconds or so for the camera to fully boot on and be ready to press record. So that's not like a huge deal, but it is something to take note of and just, be aware of when you're out on set shooting. Also, calibrating the camera sensor is crucial for getting a clean signal with a very low noise floor. You can dive more into calibrating the sensor and why you actually have to do this, but from my understanding, Red's raw sensor is really like directly related to the temperature of the environment that you're shooting in. So let's say you're shooting inside in like 65 degrees, you must calibrate the sensor to that temperature. So that way there it kind of optimizes and works best at that temperature. And then if you move the camera outside and it's 30 degrees, then you must, recalibrate the sensor there. So that way there the camera knows, okay, it's not 65 degrees anymore. It's calibrated to 30 degrees. We're gonna keep the noise levels down and you're gonna get a clean image. I'm talking like I'm the camera talking to the operator, but whatever. Basically, that's my general understanding of it. So just know that calibrating the sensor is very, very important for getting a clean image. And it takes anywhere from like 5 to 10 minutes for the camera to actually do this. But you must let the camera heat up for about 10 to 15 minutes for the body of the camera itself to get to the proper temperature to then perform the calibration. So that's just another thing you have to think about when shooting on set. You pull up, you make sure you turn the camera on, you follow your SDI protocol, you let it heat up, and then before you start rolling for the day, just boom, calibrate the sensor for a couple of minutes, and then you're ready to go. IR pollution is also a thing with the Komodo, and this is a thing that I was never even aware of because I've never shot on a camera that I have encountered this problem with. But the first time I went out to shoot with the Komodo, I slapped on my Tiffin variable ND filter, and when I cranked it up to the maximum amount of ND that I had, everything that was black in the frame turned purple, and I was like, what the heck is going on? So this is actually completely normal, and the way to avoid this is to just use high quality ND filters. And the way that I have gotten around this issue is I purchased the Nisi IR ND hard stop ND filters for my matte box, and that's what I use on the bigger productions when I have time and I have an AC to help me out on set. But if you're using a screw-on variable ND, just make sure that you buy one with just make sure you buy a really high quality one. Don't cheap out on the glass that you're putting in front of your glass that you're then putting on a really expensive camera. Like, you got to spend the big bucks if you want to play with the big boys, realistically. While we're on the topic of ND filters, it really, really crushes my soul that this camera does not have internal NDs. Coming from shooting on the Sony FX6, which I'm actually shooting on right now, it is so nice to have internal NDs. And this camera in particular has variable internal ND, which is like mind-blowing. It is so hard shooting on this camera and then shooting on any other camera, because having internal ND is just, it makes life so much easier, So the last three things that I want to talk about on the bad side of the Komodo, they don't really correlate to me directly. I don't really care too much about these issues, but I did kind of want to tell you guys about them because these might be things that, are really important to you in the way that you shoot. So I know I said for me personally that the frame rate options in the Komodo aren't a huge deal, but if you do shoot high frame rate stuff and you rely on that, 4K 120p with, no crop on the sensor, then this definitely is not the camera for you. You can easily go buy another camera on the market that can accommodate that need, but the Komodo is not the high frame rate camera you should be looking at. The autofocus in the Komodo actually isn't super terrible, but I wouldn't say it's really good either, like the autofocus in a Sony camera. If you rely heavily on autofocus, then I would say definitely don't buy a Komodo because I don't think the autofocus in the Komodo is good enough to use on a client project. I wouldn't trust it. I've actually messed with it with the Sigma 18 and 35, and yeah, it's just not super accurate. It hunts a little bit, and like I said, I just wouldn't trust it on a paid job. The media and storage for this camera can also get a little bit expensive. Now, it is awesome that the Komodo takes CFast cards and not Red's proprietary Red mags, because those things are super expensive. But for some people, I can see CFast cards being a lot more expensive than the average SD cards. So if that is, one of the areas where you're looking to cut corners on costs and stuff, then I don't think the Komodo is for you either, just because your media is the most important part of the camera almost, you know what I mean? Because that is what you're using to shoot all of these jobs that people are paying you money for, and you really should not cheap out on your media. And just note that shooting in 6K resolution really stacks up on storage very, very quickly, so you will be buying tons of hard drives to, you know, properly store all of this media that you're capturing. So yeah, just keep that in the back of your mind. If that is something that, you know, kind of turns you off, then again, Komodo ain't the camera for you. Recording audio directly into the Komodo really isn't an option, in my opinion. The camera only has one 3.5 mil jack, and it's good enough for using like a Rode shotgun microphone to capture scratch audio, you know what I mean, for like on camera kind of like sound effects or just some Foley here and there. But I would not feel comfortable running any sort of like talking head stuff like this directly into that 3.5 jack. So if recording audio directly into the body is something that you need for your work, then I also don't think that the Komodo is the right choice. So with all that being said, there are still a few questions that I've been asked from multiple people multiple times, and I figured I would just address them here to, I don't know, give you a little bit more insight on how I feel about the camera. And the first question is, do I regret buying the Komodo? And the answer is no. I definitely do not regret buying this camera. Thinking about the amount of money that I've spent on this camera makes me a little sick, but seeing the footage that I get out of this thing, man, it makes me feel so much better. Like, I sit here and I'm like, man, I spent all this money on the Komodo and my kit, but then I look at the footage on my computer, which turned off. Oh no. I'm sad. After seeing the footage that I get when I go out and shoot with the camera, it's so like fulfilling and rewarding. There's just something about that footage. There's just something about the image quality. It's just got so much sauce. It makes me so happy to look at. And yeah, no, I don't really regret it, but it is a hard pill to swallow. The second question I get quite often is, do I recommend this camera? And that is a really hard question to answer because it really depends on the type of work that you're doing and your style of shooting and what you value in a camera. However, if you are a cinematographer and you are looking to level up your skills in the narrative space, and you know you're working on bigger sets with crews and you have an AC and people to help you kind of achieve the proper image, then yes, this is a beautiful camera, and I think that you should take that step into that higher end cinema world and go for it. But if you are someone who shoots weddings or events and you need autofocus and you need low light performance and you need all this crap that makes it easy to shoot with a camera and you work alone, then no, I do not think that the Komodo is a good investment for you. And the last question that I get asked all the time from many, many people is, am I actually going to keep this camera? We'll see. Anyway, that is going to wrap up this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found this helpful. If you did, please hit the like button down below. It really helps out with the channel. Make sure you're subscribed for more videos like this in the future. And yeah, with all that being said, I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.